AI never sleeps, and the Chinese don't rest during the Christmas holiday. In fact, they just dropped a new model called GLM 4.7, and it's ridiculously good. It's now the #1 open source model, so forget about DeepSeek or Kimi K2, this one is even better. It even rivals the top closed models out there like Gemini 3 Pro and GPT 5.2. So in this video, I'm going to go over all the cool things it can do. Plus, I'm going to go over its specs and performance and how it compares with the other leading models. Let's jump right in with some demos. First of all, here note that I'm just on their online chat platform, which I'll link to in the description below. You can sign up for free and use this for free. So at the top here is where you can select from the model dropdown, and note that this latest 4.7 is already available to use. Now, first of all, just a quick disclaimer, all the top models out there can already do simple stuff like writing social media posts or replying to emails, etc. What really sets them apart is their ability to do some really tough agentic coding or some really deep research or multi-step reasoning tasks. So that's mainly what I'm going to test this on today. Let's start off with an already very tricky example. So the prompt is develop an Android OS simulation that starts with a lock screen featuring a digital clock and swipe up to unlock gesture. Once unlocked, the screen should reveal a home screen with an 8-item grid of circular app icons, including Chrome, Play Store, Photos, and Camera. The bottom of the screen should feature a persistent navigation bar with a classic back, home, and recent button. And then there should also be a notification shade that can be pulled down from the top to reveal Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and flashlight. Yes, I'm going to turn on DeepThink and then press generate. Alright, so here's what I got first, and in fact, I can expand the thinking process so you can first see how it thinks through the task. So it's identifying key components and the tech stack, and then the conceptual architecture, and then here it's planning step-by-step how to implement this. So here are all the components plus the logic, and then here it's drafting the code. And then interestingly here at the end, it's also adding some self-correction during the coding process. So it seems to be like correcting itself afterwards as well. Anyways, here is the complete HTML. So I'm going to swipe up to unlock, and it already looks very nice. If I pull down here, we do get Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and flash. Very nice. And then if I click on any of these, it doesn't look like the pages are working yet, but that's because I haven't prompted it to make these pages. Now, in my previous AI model reviews, I mostly showed you some examples with just one prompt, 0 shot, which don't really do the model justice. It doesn't show the model's full potential, whereas if I keep prompting it further to refine what it's building, it's actually way more impressive. So in this video, I'm actually going to show you some results after a few follow-up prompts. So here, for example, I asked it to also make a working dummy version of messages, maps, settings, and music, and then the map didn't really work, so I asked it to link to OpenStreetMap or something to show a real map in the map app. And then in gallery, just show a grid of random photos that you can actually use. Anyways, after a few follow-up prompts, here is the final Android simulation. So I can click on Chrome and it gives me a dummy page of Google, and then I can click on photos and it does give me a grid of photos like this. And then for messages, it actually outputs this messages interface. And then here is maps. It was actually able to pull up OpenStreetMap and give me a map of New York. Very cool. And then here are some settings, which look beautiful. And then we have music, which looks like this. Very nice. So, I mean, from just a few prompts, you can get it to build this beautiful Android OS wireframe. The thing I always liked about GLM is it just works. There are very few errors with its generation. Alright, now since GLM can already handle these interfaces, let's step it up a notch by creating a pretty complicated game. So I'm going to make a Fruit Ninja game, but instead of slashing with my mouse, I'm going to use my webcam for hand tracking. So it's going to track my hands to slice falling fruits on the screen. Put everything in a standalone HTML file. Let's see if this works. Alright, so here's what I got already, but it turns out the fruits were kind of small, so I asked it to make the fruits larger and more at the center, and then I still kind of lost really quickly, so I wrote add hearts, slashing it would add 1 life. And afterwards, here's what I got. So in fact, let me open this up in a new tab, and let me start playing the game. So I'm going to show my hand to start the game, and let me start slashing some fruits. Very nice. Alright, got an extra heart there. Perfect. it's as easy as that. Notice that it's actually tracking my hand and slashing the fruits as I move around. I can't believe it just got all of this in like 2 prompts. And it even included a bomb, as you can see here. So if I hit the bomb, then I lose. So there you go. In just like 2 or 3 prompts, I made a fully functional Fruit Ninja game that can even track my hand movements via webcam. That's how good GLM 4.7 is. Speaking of games, here's another fun one. So I asked it to make an isometric 3D city builder like SimCity, where I can build all of this stuff. Buildings should include houses, offices, factories, hospitals, malls, roads, parks, etc. Revenue is generated through a custom tax slider, but high rates trigger low happiness. Player must keep the global happiness meter above 95% by building more malls, parks, healthcare, etc. Make it look amazing. And then after it proceeded to code up the game, basically I asked it to implement some better logic. So for example, the buildings should be connected to a road in order for it to be used. These buildings should lower happiness, including offices and factories. These buildings should increase happiness, park, hospital, and mall. So it proceeded to do that, and afterwards, here's what we get. So in fact, let me expand this to a new tab, and let's start playing the game. So I'm gonna overlay some roads, like over here, let's say, just paving some roads first. Notice that as I'm paving these roads, it's actually deducting from my budget, and it even includes some cute animations of people walking around. Let me build some houses first. So let's build a house here, and let's say here, and over here. These are like some neighborhoods. And notice that as I add more houses, the population also increases. Very nice. And then here, let's add an office. So here we have an office, here and over here, and over here. Very nice. And then let's add some factory like over here. And then let's also add a shopping mall over here, let's say, and over here. Let's add some parks. And then finally, let's add a hospital over here and here. And let's increase the tax rate because I'm running out of money. Let's add this to like 30% because I'm really poor, but notice that as I increase the tax rate, the happiness also decreases. So I'll need to like add some more parks, let's say. Let's add a park over here. So after I add a park, notice the happiness kind of goes up a bit. So, this is a really nice like SimCity simulator where I can like balance the budget with happiness. Let me just expand this even further and add some more shopping malls and parks everywhere. And look at the happiness score. Forget about being a YouTuber. I should just go and be a mayor of a city. I mean, look at that. Even with the tax rate at 30%, the happiness is still 95%. Now, there are like some errors with this, like the animations of these people are showing up behind the buildings, but I can just prompt it further to edit this out. And notice that if I add some houses that are not connected to roads, then you can see this cross sign at the top here, which means it's not connected. So I'll need to like pave a road here to connect the house like this, or let's also pave a road here like this. Very cool. Let's also connect this one and this one. Now, because the happiness is like already 95, let's get them to work a bit more. So I'm going to add some factories here and some offices, and notice that as soon as I do so, the happiness goes down a bit. Very cool. Again, GLM just works. This has got to be the model with the least amount of errors in its generations. Alright, next up, this is even harder. I'm going to get it to make a video editor with multiple tracks on the timeline and a media library. Allow me to upload any clip and drag and reposition it in the timeline. Now, for those of you who have tried to build an online video editor with an AI model, you'll know how hard it is. Like all of the previous AI models I've tried, there were just so many errors with the video editor. Let's see if GLM 4.7 can handle this. Alright, so here's what I got, but as expected, at the beginning I ran into a ton of errors, so I had to prompt it further and also add more features. For example, allow me to drag the edges of the clip on the timeline to adjust the duration, and then also the player is not centered, center it or make it full width. And then also there's some problems with the playback if there are overlapping tracks, so I prompted it to fix this issue. And then finally it works, so next I also got it to add some effects or filters to each clip. And then afterwards, here is the full HTML file. Now this looks pretty squished, so let's open this up in a new tab. Alright, let's try this out. So it already gave me some videos to use, but let me also add an additional video. Let's say this one. And then here I'm going to drag a video onto here, and then drag the second video onto here like this. And let's play this. Alright, so it's playing the first video, and now it's playing the second video, and the playback is super smooth. Again, I mean, you can try coding up an online video editor with whatever top model you want, like Gemini 3 Pro, but you're going to run into a ton of playback issues. But this video editor that's made by GLM 4.7 just runs so smoothly. All right, so next let me pause this and let me also drag the end of this clip to over here, let's say, and then let me play this again. So it should end over here. So it's playing the first clip and then it's moving on to the second clip and it should end over here. And it does. So the timing is perfect. And then I can also click on each clip and adjust these different effects. So actually what I'm going to do is click on this one and decrease the opacity, which means this video would be slightly transparent. And when this plays, I should see this video behind it. Let's see if that actually works. And it nailed it. Indeed, it was able to change the opacity of this top video and show the bottom video. This is really impressive. Next, let me increase the opacity to 100% again, and let's try blur. So blur works, and then brightness also works, as you can see here. Let's adjust the contrast, so that also works. And then what about saturation? Saturation also works. And then we have grayscale, which also works. Sepia, which works. Hue rotate, which also works. You can see it changing the colors here. And then finally invert, which also work. And there are also effects at the top, which you can select from, like black and white, very nice. Or let's try vintage, very nice. Or cyberpunk, dreamy, which looks like this. And then invert colors, and then blurry, very nice. So let's just try a vintage one for this top video. And then for this bottom one, let's try something like cyberpunk. And let's play this again. So here's the cyberpunk video, and then it switches to this top video with a vintage filter. Very nice. So everything just works. I can also move this zoom slider here to zoom in and out of the timeline, or I can select a clip and delete the clip. Everything just works. Again, you're welcome to try this yourself, but it's really hard to actually build an online video editor. But GLM 4.7 just executes this beautifully. Next, I got it to make a 3D racing game with speed boost and collision physics. Put everything in a standalone HTML file, use publicly available assets, models, and effects for the game. And here's what I got. Initially, it gave me this, which didn't look really nice, and it didn't work. So I asked it to use a modern urban race course. The arrow keys don't move anything, make sure everything works. And then I asked it to make the visuals look even better. Import public libraries or models, make it daytime. And finally, here is my final game. So let me open this up in a new tab and let's play this. So everything looks beautiful so far. I can use my left and right arrows to move the car around, and notice that if I go through one of these blue gates, then it speeds me up. However, if I hit one of the red blocks, then I basically crash and lose the game. And that's exactly what I prompted it to include. So as you can see, GLM is really good at coding this stuff up. I've been reviewing all the top AI models out there, but one of the best is the Dream Machine's Ray3 by Luma AI, the sponsor of this video. Ray3 is their breakthrough AI video model that can generate insanely realistic 4K HDR shots with incredible control. They've just added a new model called Ray3 Modify. This allows you to reliably control your video with a prompt or a reference frame. For example, I can take this existing video of a car and change it to night or winter with just a prompt. Notice how everything remains very consistent. Or I can modify the keyframes of a video for even more control. For example, I can change the end frame of this video and look how seamless the transformation is. I can also easily replace characters in an existing video just with a reference image. Ray3 Modify handles everything flawlessly. By the way, if you're new to Ray3, this is different from other AI models. It has a reasoning engine, so it actually thinks and understands your intent and then iterates on your idea so you get exactly what you imagined. Once I get a clip I like, I can then send it through this hi-fi upscaler to turn this into a beautiful 4K HDR video. The jump in clarity, lighting, and motion is wild. Of course, Luma also has image to video, so I can upload both a start frame and an end frame to use for my video. Let's upload this as the start frame, and then write the monster destroys the city, civilians fleeing, high action, shaky camera, cinematic, epic. It's reasoning through my prompt to understand my intent better to generate a better video. Ray3 just gets the details right. Better anatomy, more consistent characters, and incredible physics and motion. It feels like a tool built for actual filmmakers and creators. Try Ray3 Modify by Luma AI today using the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code here. Or here's another example. Let's get it to make a Trello clone. The default view is a Kanban board with multiple columns, drag and drop cards, and let users color tag tasks and set priority. Also include multi-view switching, so provide a single option to toggle the same data between a Kanban board, a Gantt chart timeline, or a calendar for deadline. Let's press generate. Alright, so here's what I got first, which isn't showing anything. So here I wrote, I don't see any tasks in the board view. The timeline also looks strange. Also make it dark mode. And then here's what I got next. I couldn't rearrange the cards, so I prompted it further. And finally, here's what I got. So in fact, let me open this up in a new window by clicking this button. And let's test this out. So here are the current tasks. I can also add a new task. So let's call this test and then 1, 2, 3, 4. For the start date, let's set this to 24 all the way to 26. And let's set the color to purple and then click save. So you can see indeed it has added my new task here, and let's actually click on timeline to see if it has also added my new task. And yes, it has. This is 24 to 26, as you can see here. And then this also is added to my calendar. So the due date for this new task is over here. Very nice. So all three of these views work. Now I can rearrange these cards if I want, like this, or here, let me drag this to the top, like this, or I can drag this one to done, like this. Very nice. Or let's try changing the date. So on this timeline, currently we have this client review, which is December 23rd to 25th, I think. Let me click on client review, and yes, that is true. Instead, let me change this to like 25 to 27 and click save. Notice that the deadline is updated over here. And if I click on timeline again, the client review block has also been updated. Same with the calendar, so the deadline for this one has been updated to here. So everything just works. In just like 2 or 3 prompts, I basically created a fully functional Trello clone where I can keep track of my team's tasks. It's just so easy to build working apps with GLM. Everything just works right out of the box. Here's another tricky one. Develop a drag and drop UI builder like Figma, include snap to grid and alignment guides, include an export option to HTML, a component library for reusable UI patterns, responsive breakpoints that allow users to toggle between mobile, tablet, desktop, etc. And here's what I got initially, but it was quite basic, so I also asked it to allow me to resize the elements by dragging the corners, add buttons to send forward and backward, add these components, I even misspelled components, add a gallery of 4 images, testimonial card, checkout card, and nav menu. And then here's an additional prompt. For each element, I want to also be able to set the corner rounding and border width and color. For the text, allow me to select different fonts as well as bold, underline, italic. For nav menu, allow me to change the names of the menu items and the site name. So after just 3 prompts, here is what I got. So let me open this up in a new tab and let's play around with this. Let's first drag a nav menu at the top here, and this looks pretty good already. Let me change the brand to AI search, and then these items are okay. And actually, let me change the background to something like dark gray, like this. And let me expand this all the way out here. Very nice. And then let's add a button over here. So button works. I can also drag the corners around to resize this. I can also change the background color of the button like this, or the font of the text like this. Very nice. And then let's see what card is. So here's a card, and let me change the text to something like this. So I think a card is just like a text block basically. So I can do something like this, for example. And then for image, let's see what that does. So it actually gives me a dummy image, which I can drag around. Very nice. Let's increase the corner radius of this to like 5,000 or something. And let's make this a circle like this. Very nice. And then here we have a gallery. So let me drag this down here. And this is indeed a gallery of 4 images, as you can see here. Very nice. And then let's drag a testimonial card here, which looks like this. Very nice. We just reposition some of these. And then we also have a checkout card, which looks like this. Very nice. And then we have the nav menu up here. And I can like resize this if I want, or also change the background to something like this. Let me delete some elements. Let me like reposition some of this stuff. But you know, everything just works. Now, maybe you're not into coding apps or games, so here are some other useful stuff you can do with GLM 4.7. It's actually multimodal, so I can feed it this image of this taxonomy tree. Notice there's a lot of data in this image, including the number at each point, plus all these different scientific names. So I'm just going to paste this image into the chat interface, and then right from this taxonomy tree, make an interactive node graph in one HTML page. Let's press generate. All right, and here's what I got. Notice that this is just one prompt. I didn't even need to prompt it further. And if I click on any node, it actually gives me the information of that node. Let me actually split screen this so we can fact check if this is correct. So let's try to find HIV type 1. So I can search up here for HIV and then press find, and you can see it has pulled up HIV1, which is down here. Now, if I stretch this out, this is connected to lentivirus, which is this like red family. Very nice. So as you can see, it's able to turn something pretty complicated like this into an interactive node graph like this, which I can play around with and also search for information like this. Or here's another example. I have this really complicated financial spreadsheet, which is just a ton of numbers like this. It looks pretty ugly. I'm just going to drag and drop it into the chat and then ask it to make a beautiful comprehensive financial report based on this data. Use interactive graphs and charts where necessary. Let's press generate. And then I didn't like the look of the profit and loss statements, so I prompted it further to format this better. Use graphs instead of a table. And then finally, here is what I got. Let me open this up in a new tab. And as you can see, everything is interactive and very nicely formatted. This one is also pretty cool. In addition to, plotting out the revenue and expenses, it also plots out the trend from Q1 to Q4. Very nice. And then down here are the assets, liabilities, and equity. Here we have some key performance takeaways, risk assessment and ratios, strategic future directions. So there you go. Now, GLM 4.7 is also really good at doing deep research. So let me paste in this pretty complicated medical research prompt. I wanted to investigate this enzymatic deficiency of this in a rare disease, detail the differences between late infantile and juvenile onset, explore the efficacy of hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy, etc., etc. And then I'm going to turn on web search and then click run. All right, here's what I got. So it's pretty thorough. Here is the comprehensive report. Here's an executive summary. And number one, here is the enzymatic deficiency and pathophysiology of MLD. It gives me a ton of information, and note that it actually cites all the references. So this is exactly like Perplexity. And then here it even gives me this nice flowchart which outlines the cascade of pathological events. Very cool. And then afterwards, again, it gives me a ton of information and diagnostic challenges, clinical subtypes. Here's a comparison between late infantile and juvenile MLD, which is what I prompted it to do. It gave me a very thorough table comparing all these different characteristics. And then afterwards, it gives me disease progression patterns, therapeutic approaches to MLD, including palliative and supportive care, disease-modifying therapies, and then finally, gene therapy efficacy. It goes over the mechanism of action, and then clinical efficacy data. Basically, this is like jam-packed with information. And then current clinical trials in MLD. Again, it gives me a really thorough table with everything that's going on right now, and then ongoing gene therapy trials, etc., etc. It even gives me a nice comparative analysis, so it seems like it's using Python to code this table up, and here's what we get. And then efficacy, comparison, safety and tolerability, yada yada yada, and then we have future directions and challenges, and finally a conclusion. Again, a super thorough and comprehensive report that would take you like days to research and synthesize, but now with GLM, it can do all of this for you in a matter of minutes. So that sums up some of my tests on GLM 4.7. I hope you can see that across the board, this is just a very solid and capable model. It's so good at coding things and deep thinking, I do sense that it actually rivals the top models out there like Gemini 3 or GPT 5.2. Anyways, next let's go over its specs and performance. So they just released this yesterday. Here are some popular benchmarks that are used from other AI labs, such as AIME, which is competitive math. Notice that GLM, which is the blue bar, even outperforms like Claude 4.5 and GPT 5.1. It's also really good at like GPQA Diamond, which is like graduate level science questions. Plus, what's really impressive is it got 42.8 for humanities last exam. This is like really obscure and tricky scientific questions. Note that even Gemini 3 Pro apparently only got 38.3%. And then GPT 5.2 got 29.9%. And then for SWE-bench verified, this is also super impressive. It got 73.8, which is really close to the top models out there. This even beats GPT 5.2, which only got like 71.8. Anyways, here are some other benchmark scores for your reference. Overall, Gemini 3 Pro does perform better, but for some benchmarks like competitive math, GLM 4.7 even beats Gemini 3 Pro. And on average, across these benchmarks, GLM 4.7 does outperform the previous leading open models like Kimi K2 Thinking and DeepSeek 3.2. So it's safe to say that GLM is indeed currently the best open source model you can use right now, and it's almost as good as the leading closed models out there as well. Now, I tried to look at other third-party leaderboards and see how GLM 4.7 compares to the other models, but it seems like they haven't added this yet. So I checked on Artificial Analysis, SWE-bench, and LiveBench, but it doesn't seem like they've added GLM 4.7 yet. By the way, here are some additional examples that they showcase. So here they got it to code up this really cool responsive website that can do all these fancy animations as I scroll down. Really impressive. Or here's an artistic portfolio website, also really nice. Or here's a voxel generation of this pagoda. Here's a particle galaxy. And here is a Rubik's Cube solver. It's also great at designing posters. So here's an example of that. Or here's an example of it creating slides. Everything is very nicely formatted. All right, next, let's also go into the nitty-gritty details of how this works. So here, they say that GLM 4.7 enhances interleaved thinking and further introduces these additional types of thinking called preserved thinking and turn-level thinking. So what exactly do these mean? Well, first of all, let's go over interleaved thinking. This is basically getting the AI model to think before every response. So it's kind of separating the thinking before doing. And because you're giving it time to think before actually carrying out the action, the benefit of this is it makes it much better at following instructions, and it reduces hallucinations or mistakes. And then next we have this preserved thinking. So think of this as like long-term memory. Preserved thinking allows the AI to keep its previous thoughts active, and this also helps reduce information loss and inconsistencies. This is especially important if you get it to do a really long task which requires it to think for a long time. You don't want it to, forget the information it thought about at the beginning. So basically think of this as like enhanced long-term memory. And then we also have this turn-level thinking, which is also super important because not every question needs some really deep thinking. What if you just ask it to write an email or like ask it what's 2 plus 2? Then using deep thinking would be a waste of time and compute. So this turn-level thinking basically lets the system or the user disable thinking for lighter requests. All right, now the awesome thing is this is already released right now. This is open weights, so you can download the model on Hugging Face. Here, if I click into this, note that this is 358 billion parameters, and I believe the context window is 200,000 tokens. This is how much you can fit in your prompt at once, and 200,000 tokens is roughly 150,000 words. Note that this context window is not particularly high. For example, GPT 5.2 has a context window that's double at 400,000 tokens, and Gemini 3 is even better at 1 million tokens, which is roughly like 700,000 words. Now, if I click on files and versions, note that the total size of this is pretty damn huge. It's 717 gigabytes, so this is not meant for consumer-grade GPUs. You'll probably need a cluster of GPUs, or you'll probably need to link at least 2 DGX Sparks in order to run this. But the benefit of having this open source is, first of all, if you do download it, it's free for you to use. But this is also especially important if you're a company and you need to handle some private data. If you use any closed AI model like GPT or Gemini or Grok or Claude, once you chat with their AI model via API or whatever, your chat messages are basically sent through their servers. So they potentially have access to your chat messages and your data. Now, for regular chatting, this is trivial, but if you're dealing with some really confidential or valuable data, then you probably don't want to send your information to their servers. And that's why running open source models like GLM or Kimi K2 or whatever on your own servers on premise is the only option. So that's the value of open source. So I mean, God bless the ZAI team for actually open sourcing this. They didn't have to, and it probably cost them at least millions of dollars to train this. So I can't believe they're just releasing this level of intelligence for us to use for free. Now, if you don't have enough VRAM to run this locally, of course, you can also try it for free on ZAI. So I'll link to the chat interface in the description below. You can sign up for free, and at the top here is where you can select GLM 4.7. So that sums up my review on GLM 4.7. This is a super powerful and capable model. I found that it's really good at agentic coding and deep research, and it gives me very few errors. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this and what other cool things were you able to get it to do. As always, I will be on the lookout for the top AI news and tools to share with you. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Also, there's just so much happening in the world of AI every week. I can't possibly cover everything on my YouTube channel. So to really stay up to date with all that's going on in AI, be sure to subscribe to my free weekly newsletter. The link to that will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.